Legal education aspires to produce attorneys who are effective, ethical, caring professionals. What environment best fosters that development? How do students learn the critical knowledge, skills, and values? How can legal educators strengthen their students' learning?
This video features students discussing their law school experiences. Their comments come from interviews with over 70 students at 7 law schools throughout the United States. These students represent a broad range of backgrounds, experiences, and academic achievements.
Many of these students described learning experiences that reflect key principles of good teaching methods. The principles were derived from decades of research in higher education. Scholarship on legal education, as well as law teachers and law students, have applied these principles to law school. The principles, which are not ranked in order of importance, establish that effective learning environments promote student-faculty contact, articulate clear, high expectations, use time effectively, respect differences among students, foster cooperation, provide prompt feedback, encourage active learning.
Promote student-faculty contact. According to research, quality student-faculty contact in and out of class motivates and engages students.
When you have a professor that shows that they care about you and that you respect and like, it's not that you just want to work harder, it's that you don't want to let that professor down. And you feel like, man, I want to work hard for this professor. And the classes where you like your professor and they treat you with respect, you work a heck of a lot harder.
One of the things that has been at least most encouraging to me as a student has been to have those professors that seem to be willing to be more than just a conveyor of the law, but also to look to mentor to you in some way or form. It's the professor's countenance when you come up to the professor after class and ask questions, or when you go to their office to ask them about what it is that you have or have not understood.
The classes that I think are the best are where the professor knows what's going on with the students when they come to class and how they're likely to be feeling and where they might be coming from, and is able to bring the law to bear on those experiences.
Another thing which I think is important is for the professor to make you feel like no question is stupid. And many times, I really appreciate professors who go, does everybody understand? Like 3 times, because sometimes you may not understand, but you feel, awkward asking because you feel like you're the only person who doesn't understand.
I think it's easier to like professors that will admit that they don't know the answer, or that will say, that's a great question and I hadn't thought of it. And I think that it makes a professor seem more credible to students when they admit that they don't know the answer to something.
One of the things that did work would be to humanize each student. I mean, when you raised your hand, it was not you in the back or you in the blue shirt. It was Ms. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. And that absolutely made you feel like, all right, the focus is on me, and this professor wants to hear what I'm about to say.
If you were to, compare what successful teachers do, that's what you'll find that they do. And they make the students feel like they are learning something and that it is fun. Energy has to be there. And the compassion also needs to be there.
If your students are not coming up to you after class or coming to see you in your office, you're doing something wrong. Learning is stimulated by the discussion and by feeling positive in the classroom and enjoying what you're doing in the classroom. And if your students are enjoying what they're doing in the classroom, they're going to come and talk to you about it. They're going to talk about their ideas.
I like to say to professors, if you make an effort outside of the classroom to get to know students who are not like you, from different cultural backgrounds, you'll make them feel more comfortable in your classroom.
What also is helpful is when professors are available outside of class and they're open to being available. Some professors are great. You go in and ask questions in their office and they'll answer all your questions and anything else that you might have.
I started enjoying one of my classes from first semester more but it was only like 2 weeks left in the semester. The reason why I didn't go talk to the professor, because in the classroom it seemed as if he was so intimidating. And I was like, I can imagine what this guy's going to be like on a one-on-one basis. But then when I went to talk to the guy, he was the nicest person I've met in a very long time. And after that, I was like, wow, maybe this stuff is actually interesting.
I learn best or feel most comfortable with those professors that really have the open door policy, where if they're there, you see them, you talk to them. And you don't only have to talk to them about the law, you can talk about the weather, sports, or philosophy, or whatever.
I know professors have their own lives to live, and they have families to take care of and spend quality time with. But it does a world of good, I think, for a lot of students to see a professor at a law school family picnic or at the barrister's ball out on the dance floor with us. I think those type of things go a long way toward endearing a relationship between student and professor, where even if the student has anxieties and insecurities about the law and the classwork material, seeing that other dimension of a professor, I think goes toward breaking down the barriers that the law student may be putting up before they give the professor a fair chance.
Articulate clear, high expectations. Expect more and you will get it. Clear, high expectations are important for both students and teachers.
With professors that have a high expectation level, that really expect a lot from their students, I think they get better results. From me, they do.
I would like to be told what you expect of me. I think that's a reasonable basis for a learning relationship, for a working relationship. If I don't then meet that expectation, that's my fault.
I think that it's important for you to take fact patterns and go through them as a class, and if nothing less, just issue spot. Just identify all of the issues so that you know that you're in tune with what the professor is trying to teach you. Also, the mock examination was very important in my first semester because the teacher actually handed out blue books, exams, and there's no way for a first-year student to conceptualize what a final exam is like. And after I blew the mock exam, I mean, it really put me in a different mind frame.
Use time effectively. Clear, realistic assignments help students prepare for class. Explicit organization maximizes the effective use of time in class.
I think a lot of the professors I've had who assign 100 pages of reading per class is really missing out on what it means to a student to sit in class and listen to them. They could probably do better for the students by assigning less reading, more, I guess, relevant reading to whatever they need to teach in that period of class. When you assign too many pages to read and people don't finish that reading, you're going to lose some students.
He gave us no indication as to where we were going to be at any given day. So we all took it upon ourselves at the beginning of the semester. We read as far as we thought we needed to read. When he moved on, you could feel the class go, ooh. And he was like, what, didn't anybody read this? And you could hear the whole class, well, it didn't say it on the syllabus. We had no idea to gauge where you were headed.
She'll assign cases, you'll read the cases. When you begin the class, she kind of lets you know what she's looking for in the case. When you're reading this case, think about 3 questions when you're reading this case. And when you come back tomorrow, that's what we're going to be discussing. So when you go home and you're reading the case, you focus on those 3 questions. And when you finish reading the case and you finish the class discussion, you know that you've learned everything that professor wants you to learn from that case.
And you almost need a lesson plan so that you have an introduction. You review the material that you've been talking about for the last couple of days to put it in context with what you're going to talk about that day. In doing that, the students get a sense of what exactly is expected and what they should get out of the classroom, and the professor knows exactly where to go and what to cover. And then throughout the class, if you can keep hitting those highlights, keep hitting those main points in your lesson plan so that you concretely know what you're going after. And then at the end, review. Just say to yourself as a professor, what are the most important things that these students need to get out of this class today? Let me highlight those issues and make sure that they know what they are. And then preview the material that you're going to do for the next day.
The way he organizes the class is you start off with a review of what you did yesterday. It goes on about 30 seconds to a minute. and then he does a quick overview of what you're going to do that day, and then gets into it. And when a professor does that, sometimes the first 30 seconds of class is worth, you know, the whole 50 minutes that are left when you realize, that's what we were talking about yesterday. Now it all makes sense. That's where a lot of the learning takes place.
Respect differences among students. People bring different experiences, perspectives, talents, and styles of learning to law school. Students need opportunities to share their perspectives, learn in ways that work for them, and learn from each other.
I came to law school to use the law for, in my case, public interest work or, you know, social justice, you know, even more radical. And I think one thing that I found that has gotten me down and that I talk with among my colleagues who are in the same sort of work is the lack of acceptance for the notion of using a law degree for those purposes, for a public interest purpose. And the whole sort of gearing of students towards the firm or towards you know, corporate law. And when someone expresses other interests, they're either looked at like, oh, you're a do-gooder or you're on the fringes, whereas, you know, to my mind, that's the only purpose for law. That's the only purpose to pursue a legal career, is to represent the interests of the underrepresented.
Don't let the grading system or grades define how you interact with students. Don't assume just because person A is on law review that they're better than person B. They both can handle the work. They both can excel within the law in different aspects. And try and understand where your students want to go. If they want to go into corporate, then that's a different mentality that you need to teach than someone who wants to work with the homeless or someone who wants to do family law. And not that anyone is any less than the other, but there are distinct and different personalities involved, and you need to recognize that in your teaching methods and your approach to these students.
We've come across some cases where race was an issue or women's rights should have been an issue, and we could have fleshed it out more. And some people might look at that as getting sidetracked, but we also have to understand we're pretty much learning law in a vacuum. But when we get out in the real world, we have to deal with people that are not the same color, that are not the same gender and religion or sexual orientation, and we need to learn how to deal with that effectively.
There are people who have really interesting backgrounds, have done a lot of different things, have worked in a lot of different spheres, and I find that when those type of people contribute to a conversation, it's really enlightening, really interesting.
For me, getting as many perspectives as I can really aids my learning quite a bit.
My contracts professor, first, she was very, very helpful because she pointed out on several occasions that, you know, people can learn concepts in different ways. And, you know, the important thing is learning the concept in the way that, you know, fits you best.
Thinkers fall into two categories. Some are very linear. You know, they can, linear logic, A plus B plus C equals D. It's a person that can take out the bicycle instructions on Christmas Eve and figure it out. I personally can't do that. I have to walk around the problem 16 times and look at it from every particular view before it starts falling into place for me. I think the instructors teach in a way that is comfortable for them. And if their way of thinking and their way of organizing these things doesn't fit with mine, I'm lost.
A mixture of the different teaching styles, the use of the entire spectrum from props to using the blackboard. I mean, using the chalk. The chalk never gets used in a lot of these classes. To having handouts, to encouraging groups of students to work on a project together, to do role plays. These are things that are all important. And I disagree with an earlier statement that some classes might not lend to this. I think all classes lend to these styles, to a mixture of these styles.
Time is important, and to just like give people time, think about the question and process an answer. I think teachers tend to be sort of uncomfortable with silence, and students do too, but I think that there could be more silence in the classroom to let people sort of generate responses.
I would incorporate a lot more opportunities for a student to earn his grade as he went along, or her grade as they went along, i.e. classroom participation, written projects, maybe a if the professor only wants to deal with tests, then maybe make it more than one test, or quizzes, and if you're going to test someone, maybe incorporate a number of different ways to test someone. Some portion multiple choice, some portion essay, because the bottom line is people all test in different ways. Maybe we can expand the testing process to incorporate more of people's strengths and more of an ability to show how you've done in a course over a period of time, rather than in one specific instance.
Foster cooperation. Studies reveal that learning is enhanced when it is collaborative and social, not competitive and isolated. Working with others increases student involvement in learning.
There are some professors that, you just kind of feel like, man, they're really out to draw blood today, or maybe every day, and unfortunately I'm stuck here in this class. But I think in those kinds of classes it's also very tempting for other students to sort of join in on the bandwagon. And I think law school is just a very competitive atmosphere to begin with, and unfortunately there are classmates who will basically crucify each other, and it's very uncomfortable to have to face that, not only from the professor but also from other students. And I think it's a part of the professor's responsibility to be able to maintain a level of respect, not only among themselves as a professor and the students, but also among the students themselves. And I've seen professors do that very effectively, and I've also seen professors fuel the fire.
And you had students literally whispering or rolling their eyes or showing disapproval of a certain person's, arguments, basically, or points of view. And I just, we're talking about professionalism.
The atmosphere is intimidating enough that it's hard just to throw out your own opinion. I guess the number one question on your mind being, boy, will I sound really stupid for saying this? And that sort of atmosphere is definitely not conducive to having all the voices heard.
Because if people don't want to throw out their ideas and discuss them with their other classmates, then they will never be able to grow in the wealth of their knowledge. They'll just keep in whatever ignorance is inside, and they'll also keep in what other blessings of tidbits of knowledge they have to share, or of enlightenment locked up inside as well.
The very first day, the very first law school class, I was called on. So I started telling him about the case the way it was written in the book. And I failed to remember that the fellow in the case had been shot twice. And I thought, oh no, I'm missing something. And I thought, this is where he's going to get me. He even looked like John Houseman. And it was really wonderful because he turned the situation that could have been potentially very embarrassing for me into a no-problem situation. He said, is there someone who can help her out with this? And someone remembered, yes, they'd been shot in the lip. And then he said, all right, good, you were doing a good job, let's continue.
It seems to me that it would be far more productive to have small exercises that students can go and prepare for at home and then be engaged with other students with, because it's not just reading that we're trying to learn here. We need to be able to talk to people, we need to be able to argue well, we need to be able to stand up on our feet and make presentations.
To illustrate negotiations, she had us break up into small groups and negotiate a contract, basically, or negotiate a settlement.
And it made so much more sense.
And having a small group, it's a lot safer. You see those people every day, and they're a lot less likely to say something mean to you too, because they know they're going to have to face you. They're going to be sitting, 5 feet away from you for the rest of the semester. So people are generally a lot more respectful of each other in a small group than they are in a large group.
Some of the people I disagree with the most were in my section, and we came to really care about each other and understand you can have different viewpoints. You can argue opposite sides and really believe them and still be good friends. And I think that's something valuable for law practice. You can leave the courtroom and still be able to have a camaraderie and a friendship with each other.
Provide prompt feedback. Knowing what you know and don't know focuses learning. To facilitate learning and improve performance, students need to practice and receive feedback about what works and ways to improve.
A lot of people say you're learning to think like a lawyer, a whole different learning method, and I think it's kind of cruel almost that they're going to make you wait until December. And there's a lot of anxiety, especially among just the student body, that it's only fair to give a person kind of a halfway check to say you're doing okay, or you're almost over that learning curve hump. You're getting there, instead of waiting till the end, because I think that finals can be a very lonely time.
And I think those things, practice exams, are just fabulous, and I wish I had some, because I know that they would help. I know it would give me an idea that I knew or didn't know what I was doing, or what I was good at and what I needed help on.
I remember the first couple of weeks that I was in her class, she actually gave us a couple of hypotheticals to turn in. And she didn't grade them, but she commented upon them. And that was very helpful.
Where we turned in a brief and we had comments on our brief, where we were given in-class assignments where we would work with a partner, and then we'd come together as a class and discuss it and what were the good points, that could have been brought out. Where we were given an exam, a sample exam, and she went over the sample exam. I felt like at the end of that course, right before my final, that although it does matter what grade you get, granted, the grade wasn't as important, because I felt that I had learned something in that course.
That teacher was a hard worker and takes an extra effort to criticize your work and put notes in the margins. I went back and looked at my final exam, and she drafted a long memo about common mistakes that students made, and I put the top answers from each of the 3 final exam questions in the final exam packet that she had for us all to take a look at and to compare with our own final exam. I think that may be another experience that will help to enhance my ability to take final exams later.
I felt like your confidence is really boosted, because where you might have been off track, she put you on track. Where you were on track, she confirmed that you were on track. And that really has a way of just keeping you there and making you feel like you're doing what it is you want to be doing and what you should be doing.
So for me to actually practice lawyering skills while I'm in school and in a class, and the teacher would videotape some of these sessions and sit down and talk to us. Here's what I think you did really well. Here's what you might try differently. It was just incredibly invaluable, because now I feel like I've had a little bit of personal guidance and mentorship, and it was just a profound experience.
Encourage active learning. Learning is enhanced when students can talk about what they are learning, write about it, relate it to past experiences, and apply it to their daily lives.
When professors are able to intertwine the doctrine with their personal practice, it really works well. And even now, you'll still remember principles based on his characterizations of characters and different people and scenarios. And that works well because the professor is allowing you to see what he's done in practice, what you have no idea yet at that early stage, and applying it to a doctrine. You can say, okay, this is how it works. Bring in different documentation, pass it out. Let the class see what a complaint looks like, what a petition looks like. These things all work, because half the times you don't have a clue until you do an internship or a clinic.
Something that really helps me when I'm learning is having an example. Like if you have to write a complaint, or if you have to write some kind of motion for a class, it's always nice to have some kind of example to go from, and I can look at and say, oh, this is what I need to do and how I need to structure it. That's always helpful for me.
He encouraged us that if we found anything interesting in criminal law relating to criminal justice, to cut it out, bring it in, he would discuss it. And again, I enjoyed his supplementary materials even more because he took the time to show us, look, if I see something that might relate to you today that you can apply and apply to the readings, I'm going to bring it in. And he did, and I enjoyed those.
Anything where it's like you're actively involved in it, I think that helps. Whenever a professor has assigned me to go to court, it is the greatest thing, because it's, you go in there and you're supposed to analyze something and report back on what you've seen, and it's like, you know, aha, that is a summary judgment motion. That's what they do. You go in there and you stand up and you do this, and it's not this big mystery anymore.
Thought it was kind of silly, the role playing. But it turned out that that was the best preparation for the exam of any class I ever received. And it was very interesting because you would have to formulate the arguments, and you'd be opposing someone, and you'd be a judge, and often it was a justice, so you had to figure out what their viewpoint was. And it was a very good way to learn.
You're the plaintiff, you're the defendant. Go home and prepare your argument and come in here and you're going to give it. And when I was participating, I felt like I was doing what a lawyer would actually do, which is go home, look at this, look at a couple other resources, and bring that in and argue it. And even when I was listening to it, for me to have real people with their energy and their emotion behind it was much more powerful than these black and white words on the page. To hear it in terms that real people would use, for me, made the law come alive.
The principles discussed in this video provide one framework for creating an effective learning environment in legal education. Some principles overlap with one another, and you may see them described differently. Research shows that whatever the label, implementing the underlying concepts of these principles will enhance learning.
The extent to which professors implement some or all of these principles depends on their teaching goals and objectives, institutional support, and the needs of the students. Our goal in creating this video is to inspire legal educators to explore principles that will enhance student learning and ultimately the practice of law.